The capital of Burkina Faso, no one could have predicted that this night would forever change Africa's security map. The leader of that armed group was just a 34-year-old paratrooper officer, Captain Ibrahim Traoré today. 2 years later, the same young leader has managed to sweep terrorist organizations from his lands and create a revolution that fundamentally changed neighboring countries' security strategies. So what magical formula did this young soldier possess that enabled him to neutralize terrorist organizations that had been ravaging the region for decades in such a short time when Ibrahim Traoré came to power? Burkina Faso was in complete chaos. Jim is guest and dozens of local terrorist organizations ruled vast areas stretching from the north to the south of the country. An average of 15 to 20 civilians lost their lives daily in terrorist attacks, and a third of the country was effectively under terrorist control. The most striking statistic was this: in 2021, a total of 834 civilians were killed in terrorist attacks in Burkina Faso. This figure was even higher than neighboring Mali too. 2 million people in the country had been forced to leave their homes and were living as internally displaced persons. The education system had collapsed, more than 6,000 schools had closed, and 1.2 million children were unable to receive education. The scene before Traoré was a complete disaster. However, the young leader saw this situation as an opportunity. Ibrahim Traoré's first revolutionary move in the security field was to completely reverse traditional military thinking, while previous governments and international powers adopted external intervention strategies in combating terrorism. Traoré developed the opposite approach. His most radical decision was to place civilians at the center of the security system. He established a popular militia system called volunteers for the defense of the homeland. This system adopted principles of enabling every village to achieve the capacity to ensure its own security, recognizing that local people had the best intelligence about terrorist organizations, strengthening local resistance instead of continuous support from military units, and integrating traditional hunters and local security forces into modern systems. The capital of Burkina Faso, no one could have predicted that this night would forever change Africa's security map. The leader of that armed group was just a 34-year-old paratrooper officer, Captain Ibrahim Traoré today. 2 years later, the same young leader has managed to sweep terrorist organizations from his lands and create a revolution that fundamentally changed neighboring countries' security strategies. So what magical formula did this young soldier possess that enabled him to neutralize terrorist organizations that had been ravaging the region for decades? In such a short time, when Ibrahim Traoré came to power, Burkina Faso was in complete chaos. Jim and dozens of local terrorist organizations ruled vast areas stretching from the north to the south of the country. An average of 15 to 20 civilians lost their lives daily in terrorist attacks, and a third of the country was effectively under terrorist control. The most striking statistic was this: in 2021, a total of 2,134 civilians were killed in terrorist attacks in Burkina Faso. This figure was even higher than neighboring Mali too. 2.2 million people in the country had been forced to leave their homes and were living as internally displaced persons. The education system had collapsed, more than 6,000 schools had closed, and 1.2 million children were unable to receive education. The scene before Traoré was a complete disaster. However, the young leader saw this situation as an opportunity. Ibrahim Traoré's first revolutionary move in the security field was to completely reverse traditional military thinking, while previous governments and international powers adopted external intervention strategies in combating terrorism. Traoré developed the opposite approach. His most radical decision was to place civilians at the center of the security system. He established a popular militia system called volunteers for the defense of the homeland. This system adopted principles of enabling every village to achieve the capacity to ensure its own security, recognizing that local people had the best intelligence about terrorist organizations, strengthening local resistance instead of continuous support from military units, and integrating traditional hunters and local security forces into modern systems. The eastern region on the Benin and Togo border was Traore's second major success. The hearts and minds strategy applied in this region was completely different. Soft power approaches, such as amnesty programs for young people who joined terrorist organizations, economic support packages, strengthening education and health services, and involving local leaders in the process were implemented. The results of this strategy were surprising. Within 6 months. More than 400 young people left terrorist organizations, while terrorist activities in the region decreased. By 70%, civilian support reached 90%. The most controversial aspect of Traore's security strategy was the change in relations with France. French operations, called Operation Serval and Operation Barkhane, had failed in combating terrorism in the region, and according to some analyses, had caused terrorist organizations to strengthen Traore, demanded the closure of French military bases, requested the termination of French military advisors' duties, and decided to seek new security partners. By the end of 2023, the last French military personnel left Burkina Faso, and the security situation in the region began to improve after the French withdrawal. With the cooling of relations with France, Traore established new security partnerships. Cooperation was developed with Turkey in drone technology transfer, military training programs, and intelligence sharing agreements were signed with Russia in military equipment support, and security consulting partnerships were established with China in infrastructure security, cybersecurity, cooperation, and economic intelligence. The concrete results of Traore's security strategy emerged in numbers. While 2,134 civilian deaths occurred annually in terrorist attacks in 2022, this figure dropped to 680 in 2024. A 76% reduction was achieved. The area under government control was 35% of the country in 2022, reaching 78% in 2024. The number of internally displaced persons decreased from 2 million to 1.1 million, and the number of closed schools decreased from 6,000 to 2,100. GDP growth reached 5.8% in 2023. Agricultural production increased by 40%. And the mining sector was revitalized, thanks to security. However, behind these visible successes lay a truth that no one knew. Traore's real power lay not only in traditional military operations, but in his mastery of covert operations conducted in the shadows and future technologies. So when would the world understand this young leader's true strategic genius? The answer came in November 2023. The decisions made that day in an ultra-secret meeting in Ouagadougou would change not only Burkina Faso, but the entire security future of Africa. The decisions made in a secret meeting in Ouagadougou in November 2023 would forever change the fate of the region. Who were the 12 people who attended this meeting? What had they planned? That 6 months later, the most powerful terrorist organization leaders would be betrayed by their own men. The secret intelligence unit established by Traore was called Sahel Hawks. The members of this unit were not only composed of elite soldiers, there were also anthropologists, psychologists, religious scholars, and even former terrorist organization members. The mission of this multidisciplinary team was to understand the mentality of terrorist organizations and defeat them with their own weapons. The first major success was the capture of Amadou Kofa, the second in command of the JNIM organization. However, the details of this operation were as striking as Hollywood films. The Sahel Hawks unit had discovered Kofa's greatest weakness, His sick mother Kufa secretly visited his mother every month. The intelligence unit used this information to set up a perfect trap for 3 months. The most surprising aspect of the operation was that no violence was used. Kufa was not touched, not even arrested. Instead, he was offered to cover his mother's treatment costs. In return, all that was requested was information about the internal structure of the terrorist organization. Kufa accepted this offer, and JNM received its biggest blow from its own second-in-command. Traore's second secret weapon was digital warfare, the Cyber Sahel unit established. With cybersecurity experts brought from China, was not only monitoring the digital communications of terrorist organizations, but had begun to manipulate them. The most successful operation was the psychological operation called Digital Discord. Internal conflict was created by spreading fake news among different cells of the ISG's organization, thanks to fake voice recordings and manipulated messages. The organization's 2 major factions turned against each other. The result, ISGS's power in Burkina Faso decreased by 60% without a single bullet being fired. Behind these digital operations was a surprising truth. Burkina Faso's cybersecurity capacity had reached the most advanced level in the region from 0 in just 2 years. Traore had also revolutionized this field, establishing Africa's first cyber warfare academy. This academy trained not only Burkinab youth, but also students from Mali, Niger, Chad, and even Ghana. The training program lasted 18 months, and graduates became Africa's first cyber warriors. Perhaps the most extraordinary strategy was the use of female agents. This secret unit, called Reliant Sahel, consisted entirely of female agents, because Traore had realized this terrorist organizations did not see women as a complete security threat. This prejudice became their biggest mistake. Female agents infiltrated terrorist camps, gathered logistical information, learned the personal weaknesses of leaders, and even sabotaged terrorist plans in some cases. The most striking success was when a female agent named Aisha saved 400 civilians by collapsing a 200-person terrorist camp from within. Aisha's story was particularly moving. This 28-year-old young woman had lost her own brother in a terrorist attack. When she joined the Sahel Hogs unit, she had only one goal: to destroy terrorist organizations from within. After 8 months of intensive training, she infiltrated the terrorist camp with a fake identity. She served as the camp's women's supervisor and systematically identified the camp's defensive weaknesses at the critical moment. All terrorists in the camp were neutralized through a coordinated operation. Aisha's success led to the expansion of the Reliant program, the final leg of Traore's intelligence revolution was economic. The special unit, called Money Trail Unit, focused on drying up the financing sources of terrorist organizations. The truths discovered by this unit were shocking. 40% of terrorist organizations' income came from legal businesses. Some large companies in Burkina Faso were unknowingly providing financing to terrorist organizations. Companies established with fake identities were operating in gold mining and purchasing weapons with the income they obtained. After the Money Trail unit solved this network, terrorist organization's income decreased by 70%. The biggest operation was the operation called Golden Scorpion. After 18 months of tracking, a 40-person network engaged in gold smuggling was dismantled. The leader of this network was surprisingly a businessman who lived in Ouagadougou's most luxurious neighborhood and was known in high society circles. Documents seized during the operation showed how complex the financing network of terrorist organizations was. The network extended to 12 different countries and had an annual turnover of $150 million. However, Traore's greatest revolution had not yet come. The third revolution he launched at the beginning of 2024 was a project that would change not only the fight against terrorism, but Africa's entire security understanding, the Sahel Shield System. What was this system that Pentagon analysts had raised alarms? NATO strategists had held emergency meetings, and military experts in China had begun studying this model. The heart of the Sahel Shield System was artificial intelligence technology. This system, developed in cooperation with Turkish and Chinese technology companies, could predict terrorist attacks before they occurred. The system analyzed satellite images, social media activities, economic movements, weather changes, migration movements, and even phone traffic. The artificial intelligence algorithm that analyzed this massive data set could predict the possibility of terrorist attacks with 87% accuracy. The first major test took place in March 2024. The system predicted that a major attack would occur in Dori City within 72 hours. Security forces took positions in advance and neutralized a 45% terrorist group before they could take action. This success strengthened confidence in the system, and the system was activated throughout the country within 6 months. The system detected 23 different terrorist attacks in advance and ensured their prevention. The second pillar of the Sahel Shield System was drone swarm technology. Instead of large drones operating alone, coordinated, mini drone swarms began to be used. The swarms worked like beehives, and hundreds of drones could carry out simultaneous operations with a single command. The first major application of this technology was called Operation Locust. 500 mini drones surrounded the terrorist camp on the Mali border, blocking escape routes. Simultaneous attacks were carried out from 50 different points, at the same time completely dismantling a 300-person terrorist group. Most surprising aspect was that the operation took only 18 minutes. Behind this drone technology were years of secret research and development work. Even before Traore came to power, a secret team had been working on drone swarm technology. Experts brought from Israel, Turkey, and China worked together with Burkina Faso engineers to develop special drones suitable for the geographical conditions of the region. These drones could withstand 50 degrees of heat work, even in sandstorms, and fly continuously for 8 hours. The most advanced component of the Sahel Shield System was the quantum communication network. Thanks to this system, communication between security forces became unlistenable. Terrorist organizations could no longer monitor the communications of security forces. The first test site of the quantum network was the GMA region. Thanks to the quantum communication system established here, coordination increased by 400%. Coordination delay between different units decreased from 15 minutes to 15 seconds. Quantum technology meant a great leap for Burkina Faso, because this technology was used not only for military purposes, but also in civilian communications. The country's internet infrastructure was strengthened with quantum technology, gaining resistance against cyber attacks. This development made Burkina Faso the country with the most secure digital environment in Africa. The final technology was social network analysis. This system could determine the social support sources of terrorist organizations. By analyzing social dynamics, it could foresee in advance in which regions popular support was decreasing and in which regions the risk of radicalization was increasing. The most important success of this analysis occurred in the BAM region. The system predicted that increasing economic difficulties in the region could lead to radicalization. Economic support packages were immediately activated, and terrorist organizations' attempts to infiltrate the region were prevented. The social network analysis system also played a critical role in maintaining social peace. It achieved great success in preventing conflicts by detecting tension between different ethnic groups. In advance in 2024, the system detected 15 different social tensions in advance and prevented all of them from turning into conflicts. This triple revolution created by Traore changed not only Burkina Faso, but the entire security paradigm of Africa today. Mali, Niger, Chad, and even distant countries are studying this model and trying to implement it. Major African countries like South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria are inviting experts from Burkina Faso to try to modernize their own security systems. Traore's model is also receiving great interest in the international arena. Latin American countries, especially Colombia and Peru, have begun using adapted versions of this model in the fight against drug cartels in Asia. The Philippines and Thailand are developing similar systems to the Sahel Shield system to solve their own terrorism problems, because this 34-year-old young leader not only fought terrorism, but also built the security architecture of the future. The model created by Traore fundamentally changed the classical security understanding by offering a new paradigm that combines technology, intelligence, and popular support. And the most exciting part of this story is just beginning, because the final stage planned by Traore is to establish a continental security system covering all of Africa.